Okay, let's crack on. So, welcome to everybody. Hopefully, you can hear me loud and clearly. If anybody can't, obviously you can't tell me. But anyway, I will crack on. Welcome. We've got a real interesting cross section of attendees, either one to one or in a couple of lecture rooms, one in London and one in Copenhagen today, which is interesting. I've got attendees from all the continents looking at this: South America, USA, South Africa, somebody joining from South Africa, and people across Asia and again different parts of Europe, including the UK. So welcome one and all. There is one common denominator against everybody that appears to have joined, and that is that we're all eager to accelerate revenue growth, which is kind of the big punchline for today, and indeed it's probably the punchline for all of us CROs in our day-to-day business. Today, I'm going to talk about 10 quick wins that I think are kind of hopefully not necessarily new to you, but something that will provoke a bit of thought, but particularly with some practical ideas how to bring them to life for each of those topics. I don't necessarily want these to feel like they're one-offs, because we all know that we want to create sustainable growth and we want these revenue ideas to kind of land and be embedded for the future. But hopefully there's just a few ideas I can provoke thought on that are things that can be continued on an ongoing basis. And they're a combination of sort of practical things and behavioral things, which will make more sense when we get going. New ideas, hopefully some new areas as opposed to those business as usual things that you'll tend to see. But the purpose is to provoke that thought from an exec perspective. So the way to think of this is, how might this particular idea, even if it's not exactly going to fit my particular business, how might it relate to me and how might I be able to leverage it? Please feel free to use the chat functionality here for those of you who can use it. I'll do my best to multitask and answer a question. And if for some reason I haven't, then please feel free to ping me afterwards. We'll crack on. Just in terms of the agenda then, very brief introduction. Most of that's done, you'll be pleased to know. Just going to give you a little bit of a backdrop from my own corridor walking in terms of the feedback I'm hearing from CROs, and you might agree or disagree with it. Then we're going to get into these 10 quick wins, just to sort of puncture some thoughts on that topic. And at the end, I'll just talk about a number of free tools that I'm happy to just give away for anybody that's interested. And those tools that have been relating to some of the top topics we've been talking about today, they're complementary to those topics. Things that I've been using quite in anger myself as a practitioner, but also many CROs, in fact, board members that I've worked with recently that have used these tools and templates and found very useful. So I'll come back to those at the end of the session today. And in terms of just a little bit by way of an introduction to me, I guess my life sort of breaks into three neat thirds, really. My formative years, when I was still in shorts, was as a professional sportsman. That sporting DNA ever since. And then when I got into the sort of big wide world of business, I spent most of my formative years in very large global corporate companies like Shell, and then the global telecoms world with Cable and Wireless and BT. And my last sort of, if you like, proper day job as an operator was running a chunk of WorldPay, which is one of the world's largest fintech companies, mainly in the payment space, for those of you that haven't heard of them. But they were owned by two private equity companies, Bain Capital and Advent. And when I sort of slumped across the line, having completed my duties at WorldPay, I was then headhunted by those two private equity companies to act as their commercial expert, if you like, advising them on how to drive top-line growth in their portfolio companies. So I've spent the last 7 years doing that with both Bain and Advent, as well as working with Alex Partners, who some of you may have heard of, who are also another consulting company that operate very much in that kind of growth box. But in summary, I guess I've got that experience of blue chip operational experience as an executor, then sort of 7 years plus of sort of private equity experience and all the sort of mood music that goes with those sort of guys, and my sport that gives me that DNA sort of results-driven attitude. And then I guess just from an Optilium perspective, why did I create Optilium? Well, I guess having just had that backdrop I described and then spent sort of the last 7 years advising as a practitioner, what I have observed is that the CRO role is still a very new one, right? It's the you'll relate to this as you are CROs in the main, or at least you're in that field. And because it's a fairly new role, there isn't actually much support available. It's quite sparse, whether that's formal or informal. I mean, the kind of disciplines that a CRO looks after, like sales or marketing, there may be some sales training and marketing methodologies that you can pick up. But the role as an umbrella role of CRO is still quite under-supported, and it's also quite exposed, isn't it? Massive expectations and growth damn difficult. And so I've been continually asked for that practical, sort of easy to understand, easy to execute advice and methodology on how to accelerate growth. And that's kind of really where I've found my little niche. It's advising the private equity companies, and the other half of my day is running this Optillion Limited business, which is all around mentoring for CROs and advising sort of medium, really small, medium and large companies how to grow their top line. And I guess it's because I'm formally qualified in those disciplines as a CRO in marketing and sales, but also accumulated tons of knowledge and experience doing it from that blue chip world. And I guess the summary for me is I've sort of democratized and crystallized that knowledge and dumbed it down so I can understand it, excuse me, and then and make it simple to execute. So that's kind of what I do, a no jargon way of helping CROs, and I deliver that in the form of one-to-one coaching and mentoring, as well as advisory work with those large, small, and medium-sized companies. So anyway, reach out to me if you want to know more about that. Just by way of a backdrop to today's 10 tips, I guess this is kind of what I'm hearing. There's a chap called Fred Reichheld, who's a Bain fellow, not a Bain Capital, but a Bain Consulting, who's a brilliant authority on things like customer loyalty. In fact, he invented NPS, for those of you who know or use it. There's a book that he's written called Winning on Purpose, which is free. I can find him on LinkedIn. He argues that successful organizations have one primary purpose, and that is to enrich the lives of their customers. Okay, I mean, essentially, the most successful companies are perceived by their customers as an indispensable part of their lives. We can all relate to that, can't we? They want that classic trusted advisor, someone who's integral to their business, who doesn't just provide products and solutions, but looks ahead and anticipates known problems, keeps them one step ahead. Very much part of business. And of course, that primary purpose, he argues, has a direct measurable correlation to their share price, and there's some quite compelling evidence that says so. But I mean, the punchline again to that is that actually, therefore, the primary role of a CRO is to accelerate that revenue growth by becoming that integral part of the customer's world. So we're the custodians of the revenue agenda, if you like. And these are the sort of top 5 things that I just wanted to crystallize, or top 6, in fact, top 6 comments that I'm hearing from CROs as I walk the corridors. I don't need to read them all out, but you can see them, and you'll hopefully they'll resonate with you. I'm just sorry. Well, I just admit more people into the webinar. For me, I feel out of control. I say this is sort of stuff I've been hearing in the last 12 months, but actually I've been hearing this for the last 5 or 6 years. You reflect and think what you think, but lots of siloed organizations, people feeling out of control due to the lack of proper data, or certainly lack of insight. People talking about putting the customer at the heart, but actually spending a lot of time talking about other stuff around internal products and issues and so on. Budgets being constrained, tons of complicated tools and platforms that aren't being leveraged. And I guess the relevant one that perhaps is what we're going to echo on today is, it's all very well talking about long-term blueprints and strategies, but I've got 90 days to show progress. And I hear that an awful lot, whether it's people who've just walked into their job, or actually people who've been there for a couple of years and always feel like they've got a bit of a deadline, whether they're just about to start a new year, getting to the end of a year, quarter's a tough one, etc. So, I'm just getting that kind of, feedback around complexity, noise, distraction, conflict, and a lack of control. And all of that, frankly, leads to stress, which is kind of what I get a lot of feedback around from CROs, sadly. So the challenge is, how do we accelerate revenue growth despite all of this noise that's out there? And frankly, how do we survive personally while we're doing it? And that's really the bit of a backdrop for why I wanted to touch on the 10 quick wins for this year. And I think I've collated these 10 wins really from my personal experience, really as a practitioner, but also in my advisory capacity, where I've deployed all of these things at some time in one of the portfolio companies, and indeed with CROs in my coaching and mentoring capacity. And I've consciously selected these that kind of work across a variety of different businesses, because I'm also conscious that the people attending today will be from a variety of more classic products and services businesses. You may be from a SaaS company, looking down the list, and very much in different size and in different geography, as I talked about earlier on. But I'm going to talk about these very much from a sort of a, it doesn't matter where you're from. There's probably something in some of these that everyone can take away. If you like, a smashed glass in emergency situation, but in a sustainable way. Also, tried to kind of group these, as we go along the customer journey. You'll see a natural flow to these 10, but some of them apply to each individual part, and some of them just apply, frankly, to all of them. They're a combination of either, I say, initiatives, or they are just behavioral things as a leader. I'm not suggesting, by the way, insulting anyone's intelligence by thinking that you don't know about these, of course, but I just want to provoke thought, and hopefully some of these topics will be useful. So let's crack on with them straight away. Number one, it's about focusing on the sweet spots, isn't it? It's not a new phenomenon. But what I mean by this is are you clear that you have a ruthless, laser-like understanding of where you should be focusing your attention? Are you focusing your attention and all your skills and resources and your troops, if you like, on those critical areas of growth? Why? Because obviously that's going to optimize your resources and to maximize the opportunity, isn't it? You're not going to waste your time on areas of the business that aren't going to grow. We know for a start that the easiest and the sweetest source of growth for any of our businesses is our existing customer base. So, what do I mean by that? Some practical actions on this one to get going. The way we organize ourselves, the way we focus ourselves has to be, in my opinion, using a growth-orientated segmentation. In other words, for our backbook of existing customers, are we making sure that we understand those companies that we have as customers that are the largest and actually who we have the most white space with? Because guess what? Those are going to be the ones where we have the most opportunity for growth. Now, I don't need to embarrass or pretend that you don't know this, by the way. I'm just suggesting that we don't always look at our customers through this lens. We often lazily just group them into large, medium, small. We go to market the traditional way, but we don't necessarily understand where the sweetest spot for growth is. So I would argue, and I've got templates and tools that I can happily share with you on this, that we must start to look at our existing customer base through this lens and this lens only. It doesn't mean to say you don't organize yourself externally in vertical markets or whatever way you like, frankly. Internally, we need to make sure we group our customers where we have the most growth. In this example, using this, you probably can't read this box that easily. Customers in the top right are the ones that are the biggest with the most white space. Bottom left are the smallest companies who we've actually got everything sold to. With the way we manage them needs to be very differently. We might have a self-service desk, inside sales, you name it. You understand this, you don't need me to tell you. But we've actually consciously put our customers into these boxes to make sure that we don't waste our valuable resources in the wrong boxes. Top right, we would put all of our skills, our specialist sales, maybe our exec alignment plans, etc. Here, down here on the left, we wouldn't. So I just want to sort of tweak the consciousness really in terms of, do you actually really look at your customers through this type of lens or not? And with that, reset the operating model. I don't want to over glamorize this. It could be, some people with 3 people in the business need to do this. Do we have our skills actively aligned in this way? Do we have different portfolios of different amounts of customers to an account manager, for example, in this box? We could have 200 to 1 in the managed efficiency box, and maybe almost 3 to 1 in the attack box, because they're so important. And only our specialists are allowed to play in the attack box. We don't put them at all in the bottom left. Anyway, just want to sort of tweak the consciousness on this whole piece in terms of how we want to think of our the layout of our customer base. Tip number 2, stop doing stuff. Right? Despite the best laid plans, there are always initiatives in play, in my opinion, that need stopping. Right? So seek out the busy fools, if you like, here. Don't be afraid to just get things done. I've written quite a few newsletters, posts, blogs on this. I've even done webinars just on this topic alone. But the point of this is it's all about focus, isn't it? By removing the distractions, you remove the excuses. You remove the things that aren't generating revenue, right? And by the way, you also make life more fun. Employee engagement goes up when you stop doing stuff, okay? So what do I mean by this in a practical sense? Well, actually, before we even get into this, you've got to have a vision with some clear goals. You know, if you have set that clear vision, people understand where they're going, then it's easy to be clear about what you're not doing, right? But I just think it's very difficult to motivate and explain what not to do if there's no line of sight what the overall objectives are in the business. So just check that you've actually been really clear about what your objectives are for your team, for the business, for the company, for that. But specifically here, and it's something I like to give the label as Project Oxygen, so it gives the front line the air to breathe, if you like, is do an audit of all the things that are going on. And by the way, your team can do this for themselves for you, and that gets them much more engaged. But we all know that businesses are a chamber of great ideas that often have multiple projects with multiple arms and legs, but often with any, if any, no goals, lack of project management, and frankly, they dilute critical resources. So focus down on those initiatives that are out there and maybe kill them off and just keep one or two if they're really important, okay? But secondly, if you just think about this, and again, this is just an example, you probably can't read it very well, but think about your area of operation, whether it's in service, operations, a technical team, but think about all the things your salespeople are doing or your marketeers are doing that they shouldn't be doing. What do they think they shouldn't be doing? Is there someone else that could be doing it better? So if you capture those things and then find the right home for them, A, they'll be done better by someone who's more appropriately doing them, and B, it frees up your team to do what they should be doing, sell mainly. We all know there's a number of surveys that I've advertised actually recently, but most of them suggest that the maximum amount of time that salespeople are spending with customers is between 20 and 30% of their day. The rest of it is spent doing stuff like this that they shouldn't be doing. So what could be easier than as a quick win than just giving your frontline teams, double the amount of time they spend in front of customers? And guess what? You might get lucky with more opportunities and more sales if they're spending more time doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then the final part of it here is just make sure you're checking the right KPIs. You're measuring the things you said were important, and don't keep measuring the things that aren't important that you said you were going to stop doing. You'll see a lot of KPIs measuring initiatives that have been stopped. Third quick win, leverage the ecosystem. Massive blind spot in my mind. A whole world of players out there around your customers and around your business, both at the macro and the micro level. Make the most of the suppliers, the partners, the integrators, the consultants, industry bodies, you know who they are, that are out there in the marketplace. They're also surrounding your customers. And why? Because quite obviously, there can be a real shortcut to reach and knowledge, okay? Now, I've painted the world. I'm trying to keep this really simple, okay, because it's a big old topic, right? I tend to think of the partner world as either formal or informal, and the formal stuff relates to the sell with model, the sell through model, the go to market. And that I'm going to touch that for the purpose of probably more than I do about that. What I'm trying to say is, if you just sit down and think about those relationships that exist around your ecosystem, they're free of charge, okay? There's companies and businesses out there that could give you access to contacts, give you endorsements, discovery of opportunities, all of these things here, by just engaging with them a little bit more formally in an informal world, if you like, will give you that massive shortcut. They're real quick wins, okay? So it's worth sitting down and plotting these players at a market level and at an individual customer level, particularly when we talk about that segmentation model, those key customers, who are the people around them? And put a simple contact plan in place and to make this happen, bring it to life. So the questions to consider when we're plotting out these partners is, how can I understand upcoming projects and opportunities that are out there, or with this particular customer? Who should I be talking to? Who could help me get access to these people? What wins exist for both partners if we did something together because they're already engaged with one of your customers? And for existing opportunities that are maybe already in your pipeline, how can I speed them up? How can I get more credibility from some of these other players that are playing in the same space as I can? Is there some way we could get more credibility by leveraging this other partner that's playing with my customer? Is there a way we could implement easier? Could be, for example, create a joint SLA with them, or mimic some T's and C's from an existing provider to make ours look a little bit easier. Could we do onboarding, etc., etc. The point is that there's a win-win here normally, because these are the players in the ecosystem who are not competing with us. They're playing with us. They might be supplying paper cups to them where we're providing something else. So it's just free, low-hanging fruit to me that is normally ridiculously underexploited. Number 4, launch a campaign. There we go. I just think this is the best way to create a sense of urgency. I've done this many, many times when I've walked into a new business I don't even understand. You can learn so much from just doing this about the business and about the people you have and how they operate. But it just creates a sense of urgency and boosts activity. It's a way of just feeling a little bit different to everyday behavior. Again, you don't need me to tell you what a campaign is. I don't want to insult your intelligence, but I just wonder how many times these are actually launched, because they don't seem to be that prevalent in the places that I seem to go. There's 2 major benefits for me. One, it just kickstarts selling. And it also, as I said earlier, teaches a lot about what's working and what isn't working in the organization. So while you're kickstarting selling, you can also think about other ways to improve the way that the machinery is working by just seeing how people are behaving. And just to be clear, what I'm talking about the campaign is a time-bound piece of selling activity that involves as many people as possible, okay, designed to generate incremental growth, or maybe just faster revenues. But it needs to be fun, so we need to celebrate what's going on throughout and at the end. And here's just an example of what I'm talking about in a practical way. You know, it's just a way of working our way through a pipeline. There could be a particular campaign to generate X amount of new customers or X amount of revenue from a particular product or proposition, etc., etc. But what we're trying to do is create a ring-fenced piece of work, right? There's some critical success factors associated with it. We need to have some goals, obviously. We need to commit resources and skills to supporting it. Same goes for the tools. And we also need to make sure there's a bit of motivation in there, don't we? Put some rewards and some goals, some reward and recognition, whether that's something that's of monetary value or it's some bottles of champagne, classically, whatever you think is appropriate in your world. And really importantly, some governance that goes around it. But we're trying to create a real spring in the step, you know, something that feels very different. Best example I love is what I call the back to the customer floor version. We've all seen that in different guises, but I love getting everybody out to see customers, and that includes the execs, people who are not in sales, to kind of get a campaign of getting back out to the customers, to spend time with them doing what they do. It's in their world, customers' world, understanding how they sell their clothing or how they bring airplanes into land at the airport or whatever it is you're involved in. But it's not a direct, overt sales a campaign from the customer's perspective. It's a way of getting close to them and getting engagement. But the point is, it just creates the buzz, and that's what we're trying to do with a campaign. And I guess linked to that one a little bit, another quick win for you is get the execs out on the street, okay? Because with the scarcity of resources and skills that we all have in our teams, regardless of how big or small we are, why would you leave some of your best assets sitting in the office, okay? I mean, how often does your top team actually get out and see customers? Sometimes you've been careful, you don't want them to get in front of customers if there's a passive personality, I get that. But the point is, if you can get the execs, and not just exec, but leadership and different functions of leaders out involved, it just demonstrates a sense of urgency. People will look at these guys and girls and say, well, if they're coming out, it must be important. Something must be urgent. Okay. It also shows credibility with customers. If customers see senior people coming out to see them, then it shows a sort of commitment, doesn't it? And gets them a bit of airtime to see what's going on within your business. And obviously, thirdly, it leverages the skills that you have often dormant in the parts of the business that could be used. I mean, it could even be that a lawyer gets to debate some alternative contract terms with customers, or one of your specialist technical people can get out and just share thoughts on a particular topic around the product. Not overtly selling, but it's just adding to the relationship and getting credible, exec credibility. In fact, some of the execs can actually start making commitments when in front of customers, can't they? Because suddenly they realize what it's like to be punched in the face by a customer, and actually realize that they need to do more than they thought they did. So execs shouldn't be hiding, is the point. We should make it a personal objective of every exec that they should be involved with customers if you're a customer-centric business. Here's just a tool that I used, by the way, to bring it to life a little bit, which is to sort of make it happen. Again, happy to send anybody who wants one of these tools, I'll send it over. But effectively, it lists some key customers, and it may be these are the customers in your attack box in the segmentation model I was talking about. And here's the people in your own organization down the left-hand side. And here's some little bit of science around what is this particular person doing? Are they an influencer? Are they a decision maker? What's the level of advocacy? Do they like us or hate us? And if so, what do we need to do with this person? Neutralize them, leverage them, etc., etc. Anyway, don't want to get into the detail now, but the point is we can bring this to life with some practical, simple tools that make it happen. So we get the execs out. They're, again, another set of resource that we should be leveraging. Tip number 6, I think we're up to, build a win room. Okay. Win room, war room, you've heard of these before. Why? Again, it's back to that sense of urgency. It feels differently. You know, this must be serious. We've got a thing going on. There's a big sort of, it's visible leadership, isn't it? It's your intentions are on display. We want to get moving. We want to stick a bomb under everybody. This is what we're trying to look at. And of course, this can be a physical thing. You literally have a room. I've seen this work incredibly well. We have a meeting room that's carved out specially for this, with dashboards in it. You've got the customer names and customer brands festooned across the walls. You have leaderboards, etc. But it's like a meeting environment where people come together and discuss, brainstorm, monitor, measure what's going on. And of course, in the virtual way, you might do this, because I know we live in a virtual world these days with teams dispersed around the world. But having the same kind of idea, but in a virtual world, a digital way. So we have, might do this in the Zoom meeting way. We'll obviously need to reinforce that with some digital collateral, improve the comms with some leaderboards, etc., etc. But effectively, what we're trying to do here is create a kind of cockpit where everyone meets, a place where everybody meets with a cockpit where we brainstorm, as I say, review where we're going, and also create that sort of circular feedback from how well a campaign might be going. Marketing and sales can actually discuss openly rather than competing with each other, as you see so often these days. But here's an example of some of the physical content that I've sort of seen and sort of worked with teams to build. You sort of get sales and pipeline trackers, whether that's for new business, cross sales, kind of where your campaign material would sit. Leaderboards, great idea for generating kind of the buzz and the competition. You might have some customer action stuff going on. Obviously, the results, trackers, you name it. I don't need to go through it all with you, but you can see the kind of the fact that this stuff exists generates a level of seriousness over what we're trying to do. And that's really what it's all about. Just get my slides to move. Here we go. Further down the kind of sales journey, I guess, is how can we improve the speed, if you like, that revenues actually get booked? Because obviously the longer it takes to onboard a customer, the longer the P&L is going to take to get a nice hit. So I don't want to try and generalize too much here, because everybody's onboarding is completely different than else's. So just consider, what does this mean for you? First and foremost, this needs to be a formal project, though, to just accelerate, if you like, the sort of briefcase time to sort of revenue generating time. Make it a formal thing. And apologies, it's a very boring slide actually, but it's got some nuggets of wisdom in here. I guess what I'm trying to say here is, make sure there is a formal owner to this. Just how could we improve the speed that we onboard customers? How can we get revenues generated quicker? So the sort of general theme I give you here is assess and measure that whole lead to live process. What that means for you in your business. What are the obstacles? What are the sort of milestones that we have to keep going through? And then also, what do customers expect from you? What is it they would need? Obviously, if you're a SaaS customer, that's a little bit more obvious. But whatever it is, understand what customers would expect to see, and don't assume they know what's coming. Assume they know nothing. And then you can then build that structured journey, understanding all those sort of milestones along the way. A great way to do this, by the way, and I see this, is for you to pretend you're a customer and try and order something. See how hard it is. See where the friction is in the whole process. And then you'll understand what needs to be improved. And obviously then you need to provide that guide, communication plan, leverage automation as best you can where as appropriate, and then make sure that all of the departments that are in this process are genuinely glued together. I'm not trying to suggest this is always easy, by the way. This could take months and years to get right, totally. But there might be some quick wins to be had by just understanding how much friction is in your process right from the beginning, before the customer even becomes a customer, to the day they sign up. How can we improve that whole process? A critical one for me, and I know this is further down the sales journey because these are existing customers, but our existing customers are the crown jewels, aren't they? This is the real sort of low-hanging fruit. I guess the famous analogy here is the leaky bucket. So many new businesses I see focus on new business rather than upselling. But they take their eye off the ball on churn, particularly the newer businesses, because they've had so much success for so long. They almost can't win any faster. But at some point, we've got to start looking at attrition and understand why customers are leaving us. We know it's between 7 to 10 times harder and certainly more expensive to win a new customer than it is to grow an existing one. But yet still, churn is prevalent across most of the businesses that I work with. So as I say, the customers are crown jewels of any organization, right? It's about keeping profitable customers for life. That's the mantra I like to use. So keep them and then grow with them. It's a major priority, right? I always think that the customer attrition, we need to work on it before they even become a customer. The other point to make is that often the assessment of the probability of a customer churn is normally left to the sort of subjectivity of an account manager or people at the front of the business. I think that retention has to be treated as a science, not an art. Okay, we've got to have specific tools in place, processes, behaviors, whatever you call them, that formalize the way we retain customers. And these need to be proactive, assessing and anticipating behaviors rather than sort of rear view mirror orientation. In other words, the number of companies that just create reports to tell people when companies left us, rather than using a sort of anticipation type tools to try and stop the thing happening in the first place. So number one for me is at least understand what the triggers of churn are for your business. And I tend to break these down into sort of 2 by 2 boxes. One is there's a lot of things that are controllable and there's a lot of them that aren't. Okay, uncontrollable churn obviously relates to companies that go bust on us, don't they? Or things like controllable are those things in this top left-hand box here, that we could have done something about, whether that's around the solution fitting properly, terrible quality, product breaks, all the things you'll know about. But for your business, just make sure that you've identified those triggers honestly. What are those controllable triggers particularly? Of course, there are those that you might deliberately want to lose because they're poor credit customers or whatever the reason, but just this top left-hand box around customer-led controllable churn, just make sure you've actually logged these things and if possible, capture them in your service departments and in CRM. And then secondly, anticipate the potential risks, okay? So this is something you can't read at all, but I have a tool for this, which you might want to have off me. It's identifying the fact that we can probably understand in advance what the main triggers of churn are. And I would argue that for pretty well any business, there are 4 key triggers of churn. One's around the relationship, one's around the commercial risk, one's around the competition, and the other one's around operational, things break. And I don't want to go into it now for time, but you can actually start to apply this logic quite simply and assess your customer's level of risk by applying some simple questions and answers and then sort of doing something about it. So you're anticipating the risk. Other ways of anticipating, of course, are using forms of AI and sort of a dormancy in your back book, depending on the nature of business you're in, to see the trends and so on of your services and products. So, of course, we can get to the detail another time. But ultimately, our challenge in understanding and controlling attrition is to remove as much subjectivity as possible. That's kind of the key point I want to get across. Depersonalize the whole process. Don't leave it to the whims of individual account managers or sales or marketeers saying, everything's fine, I've got a great relationship, everything's looking good, don't worry. We want to create an honest picture for ourselves, and then we can actually take action and understand it rather than pointing the finger of blame at people when things go wrong. Improve the commercials. Again, it's almost so obvious, isn't it, this one? What do I mean by this? What opportunities might you have to immediately leverage the existing base in particular to improve revenues, or maybe the commercial terms? For example, to extend the contract terms, reduce the risk of attrition, whatever they may be. We obviously need to be sensitive to this one, but repricing is the big one, isn't it? We want to be sensitive to that. We want sustainable revenues. We don't want to start whacking prices up, for example, and just get a quick kick in 1 month only to see that the attrition rate goes up. But for example, it's quite acceptable to increase prices based on inflation. And it's amazing the number of companies I work with who haven't actually raised prices even based on inflation because they're so scared about the repercussions. So just ask yourself the question, is that something that you'd have thought about? And again, I don't want to patronize anyone by trying to illustrate all the different types of B2B pricing. The key here is to just open your mind to the fact that there are different ways of doing it. There's 3 things that I might suggest, if I may, think about, okay? Just have a think about the gaps and maybe any inconsistencies that you might have across your product when you're thinking about pricing specifically. Do we treat customers in some sort of consistent way, whether it's across the customer groups? Is it the type of size of customer we have across the different product sets or solutions? Is there anything there that just sort of gives us an opportunity to just do something immediately? And then obviously the competition, again, don't need me to tell you, but have we actually done a recent analysis of competitor pricing? Do we just take this for granted a little bit? Have we got a marketing team to look into this? And just to see where we're positioned relatively to those guys and girls out there. Is there an opportunity to just tweak something without the slightest problem, frankly? And thirdly, have we looked at our products and services, that are actually really in high demand, and really we're not actually pricing them high enough, and there's an opportunity for price optimization. These are some of the examples of pricing that we all know and love. Promotional pricing is an interesting one, as we link it back to the campaign I was talking about earlier on. Is there something we might do there? Reduce the price perhaps, but because we're going to get increased volumes, or we want to just put this down to a special offer and get these customers to stick for longer for a longer term, for example. Dynamic pricing obviously only applies to those businesses that are, perhaps the EasyJets or the airlines of this world who can change these very sophisticated models they use because of demand, etc. But I'm just provoking thought really here to say, have you actually given this enough of a treatment of effort? Because you could find some real low-hanging fruit. When did you last check or test your own pricing structure? Have you done an outlier analysis on looking at which customers are priced in what way? If you did a scatter graph, for example, would it kind of make sense to you? Does it feel right? And my number 10 is more of a behavioral one, and I've written an awful lot about this, discussed and presented webinars on this. I don't want to try and summarize too much in the space of a few minutes. But when it comes to you're trying to create a sense of urgency, a lot of this, frankly, a lot of these low-hanging fruit opportunities are down to you leading with urgency and just behaving like a real CRO that's on a mission. And again, I don't want to sound corny, but actually a lot of this is around making a conscious decision to change my behavior, right? Commit to doing this stuff and managing with urgency. What do I mean by that? Well, here's my favorite 4-box model. Actually, I stole this from McKinsey. So you'll see this on their sort of 4-box model on transformation, essentially. And I argue that for each of these, there's 4 compelling things. And I was lucky that I had a mentor myself many years ago who presented this to me, and I loved it, and I use it all the time. There's 4 things that matter here when you're trying to create a sense of urgency and getting change to happen. One is that you've got to have that compelling vision. Don't need to tell you what that means, but making sure that everybody understands what's expected of them and it makes sense. Secondly, that I'm actually walking the talk. People do seek congruence in their behaviors and your behaviors, and that's what happens subliminally, consciously and subconsciously. Do we have the right skills in the team to actually execute what I'm asking of them? And back to what we said earlier, have I stopped things that aren't relevant? Can I take things out of the way to make it easy? And am I actually, being rewarded for the behaviors I'm being asked to do? But as a leader, what that means is, am I setting the right vision? Is it clear what I'm expecting of people? Am I role modeling this myself as a leader? So, for example, am I getting out there and seeing lots of customers suddenly because it's a really important thing to do? Have I put new skills into the team? Have I stopped doing stuff, as I said, and maybe have I set some very specific new KPIs that are relevant to the things I'm asking people to do. It's really important. You have to do all of these 4 things together. It's no good doing 2 or 3 of them and then falling over on the last one, because you lose all your credibility. For example, if you're role modeling all the right stuff, you've got the right vision, but then you're still measuring the wrong things, then guess what? You've lost your credibility. My favorite point around reinforcement, by the way, is having intentional conversations. I always say I think they're the smallest, biggest thing you can do that makes change happen in your team and creates a sense of urgency. So, for example, when you're at the coffee machine, do you tend to just ask how the weekend went and how the wife and kids were? Or did you actually consciously ask a question about a customer or about something that's going on in the business that you want to create even more emphasis on? That is a reinforcing mechanism. It's an intentional conversation that you deliberately have as you walk the corridors of your business. So, I apologize, but I've sprinted incredibly fast and trying to keep everyone's in an incredibly busy world out there. Those are 10 quick wins that I just wanted to bring to light. I'll just summarize them. I talked about focusing on the sweet spots to making sure that you're actually aiming your troops in the right areas to give yourself the quickest and biggest chance of success. Have you stopped doing the stuff that isn't relevant and stops people from selling specifically? Are you leveraging the ecosystem and all those partners and players that are surrounding your business, but importantly, surrounding your customers? Launching a campaign, create the buzz, get something going on a more of an urgent footing and create some fun at the same time. And as part of that, and as business as usual for that matter, are you getting the rest of the team around you and above you on the street as well? Great way to demonstrate visible urgency, building the win room. Get the revenues landing as quickly as possible as well, and getting the kind of money through to the books. Really importantly, stop the leaky bucket. That can be done straight away. Straight away equally, can we do something around the commercials, particularly pricing? Are we being a little bit too conservative with that? Is there something we could do to immediately get sustainable pricing uptick? And finally, by no means least importantly, how can we as individuals create that buzz and lead with urgency and sort of take a conscious effort to kind of behave in a different way? So that's kind of what I wanted to just prompt thought of. I appreciate that these things don't apply to everybody in exactly the same way, but I just hope that's provoked some ideas. These are all easy to do, and they're all easy to do now. Okay, some of these initiatives and some of these are leadership behaviors, as I said before. But I think I've seen these all work incredibly powerfully, really quickly, and they're all sustainable, and they sort of set a sort of sense of theme for the whole of the rest of the year. Just before I go on to talk about the free tools, just wanted to kind of, I guess, call out my own services for 2 seconds. I've spent, as I said before, the last sort of 8 years now, not 7, advising, coaching, mentoring CROs in a variety of industries and geographies. Great fun, large and small companies. I'm flattered continuously by the feedback I get from my customers, who pretty much to a person have stayed with me ever since they started. Many of them are staying live, after sort of nearly 10 years. I have relationships with my CROs. I've deliberately opened up an additional block of time schedules, mainly because I've refused to do too much global travel now, as I just slightly jet lagged too often. So I have opened up an additional block of schedules. If that's something that you're interested in, what I'm getting feedback on in simple terms is that CROs tell me they're feeling a bit isolated. They just don't have anywhere to go for advice. What they want is some shared knowledge experience in this new CRO role that's sort of pretty sparse in terms of support out there. And they want that done in a safe environment with some sort of trusted advice in a safe environment. So that's what you get from me. There's a lot of structure involved, but there's equally a lot of flexibility. So we take it, across my portfolio of CROs, a completely different approach. But there is a structure and a way of working that seems to work very well. So I'm offering a free chemistry call for anybody that wants to take me up on that. Just want to explore a little bit more about it and understand it, see if it's for you. If it isn't, that's fine. Just reach out to me on that email address, or you'll see that on the website as well. I'll even send you a simple brochure that I finally created. Makes it really simple to understand. In terms of the free tools, well, as I said before, as part of my advisory work with private equity companies, and of course mentoring CROs, I've developed a whole series of tools and templates with one objective in mind, and that's to help the execution of the theory, really. It's a sort of jargon-free set of tools that just make things happen. So it's built by me as an operator, not as a consultant, if that makes sense, all designed to accelerate revenue growth. The tools apply to all the stages of the customer journey for the CRO. So all the way from sort of optimizing the organization, in other words, how to stop doing things, tools on how to build a return on investment for the organization. I have operating model templates, etc. Growing and retaining customers, there's a big bucket of tools in that box around how to segment, etc., account development plans, and so on. Winning new customers, templates around playbooks, and indeed the whole gambit of stuff around leadership and managing, leading, controlling. So things like leadership models I alluded to a little bit earlier, governance templates, win room templates, etc. If you'd like any of them, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to just let you have one or two of them for nothing, no skin off my nose. It just gives you a flavor for how simple they are. I've used them all in anger myself, so that's the kind of endorsement. And I've deployed them in numerous organizations who tend to love them because they are designed for people who haven't got a lot of time to get into a lot of big, thick theory. They just want to get things done. So please do that. Equally, just if you want to know a bit more, there is the website there, William Limited, where you can have a look at some more materials, blogs, etc. I do write a newsletter on LinkedIn every 2 weeks religiously. Some great stuff. I know some of you follow me already on there. If you're not, please feel free to go and have a look. There's some previous webinars that are recorded on the website as well, if you find that useful. I really hope the session has provoked some thoughts on quick wins for you in your business. Do feed back to me how you found it. I'd love it if people just come back and tell me how they find these webinars, and also if you have any ideas for future ones. Again, feel free to reach out to me on the contact details here and sign up, and hope you enjoyed it. Thanks very much for coming, and I hope we meet again soon.